Hi, my name is Kayleigh, and in this video I'm going to show you how to assemble your amp rack. After that, I'm going to show you how to mount your amplifier along with wiring your amp. In this part of the video, I'm going to show you how to assemble your amp rack. You're going to need these two pieces included in your kit along with your screws and locking nuts. Okay, so now that I have all of my screws in place, I'm going to go ahead and flip my amp rack back over. I'm going to show you how you're going to want to set this piece up right here. You're going to sit like this on your amp rack because it's going to be at an angle under your truck with this curve pointing this way. To make it easier on myself, I'm going to go ahead and flip it back over, and you're going to lay it on the outside of the amp rack. We're going to go ahead and open up our kit. Included in it, you're going to have your bass knob along with your bass knob wiring. You're going to have your mounting hardware kit. And then you are also going to have your pigtails and your RCAs. Okay, so now that we have our fully assembled amp rack in front of us, I'm going to go ahead and grab my 5-channel amp. I'm going to set it on the side without this leg right here. I'm going to line it up with these two bottom holes with my power terminals facing towards the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take these nuts with the teeth on the back, and I'm going to go ahead and screw those on. I'm going to go ahead and snug these up, but not too tight, so I can do my bottom two. Now to install my bottom two screws, I'm going to go ahead and flip my amp rack over. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing I did on the top ones and push my screws through with my screwdriver. So for this next part, it can be a little bit tricky, so I'm going to grab some needle nose pliers, and I'm going to go ahead and slide my nut on top of my screw in here. Okay, so now that I have my locking nuts on here, I'm going to go ahead and hold it with my needle nose pliers and tighten it from the bottom. Okay, so now that my amp is safely on my amp rack, I'm going to go ahead and remove this fuse holder, and I'm going to install it right here on my rack. For this next part, I'm going to be installing my fuse block onto my amp rack. I'm going to need these pieces from my kit. It's going to be these two washers, these two smaller nuts, and these screws with my washers already on them. And then I'm going to take my screws and slide them in on each side. Now that I have these in place, I'm going to go ahead and take my nut and my washer, and I'm going to slide them in place underneath. I'm going to go ahead and take my needle nose pliers and hold my nut in place and screw the other side in with my Phillips. This next step, I'm going to install my fuse into my fuse block. I'm going to take my 60 amp fuse, which is this blue one right here. I'm going to go ahead and loosen these two larger screws. Decent amount to give it a little bit of play to slide my fuse in. Push this side in. And then you want to give this a little bit of a push. Now that I have these snug, I'm going to go ahead and turn my wrench sideways to give myself a little bit more leverage and make sure they're decently tight. I don't want to strip them, but I want to make sure that these connections are very tight. For this next step, I'm going to connect my power wire and my ground wire. You can either use a razor, or I'm using wire strippers to strip away some of the protection on my wire. Now that I have my power wire stripped, I'm going to come over to my power terminals, and the one that says 12 volt, I'm going to go ahead and stick my power wire in, and then I'm going to snug it up just a little bit to where it'll stay in place. Now I'm going to come over here to my fuse block, and I'm going to loosen this part a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and slide the other end of my power wire in there and snug it back up. Now that I have my power wire inserted into my terminals, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to wiggle my wire about 3 or 4 times and tighten it back up each time that I wiggle it, just to make sure it is in there nice and tight. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to go ahead and get my ground wire. I'm going to go ahead and strip it. Now that I have my ground wire stripped, I'm going to come over to my power terminal that says ground. I'm going to go ahead and insert that, and I'm going to snug it up a little bit, making sure no wires are showing. And then I'm going to take this little black piece that you pop into place right here and feed my wire down under. Okay, so now that I have my wire fed through, I'm going to do the same thing I did over here. I'm going to wiggle it, tighten it up, and wiggle it a couple more times and do the same. I'm going to wiggle it again and make sure it is in there pretty tight because any loose connections over here can cause big problems.